The streets of Manila pulsed with daily life, while the tropical sun punished the hurried passers-by. Among them, Emmanuel Manny Santos walked with his head down, his hands calloused from years of fighting, hidden in the pockets of simple pants. Despite his 55 years, his body still maintained the posture of a fighter, even though the years of glory had been left behind, replaced by an ordinary life as the owner of a small boxing gym on the outskirts of the city. The faded posters on the walls of his establishment were the only silent witnesses to a glorious past, when Manny had won titles in 8 different weight classes and his name echoed in packed arenas around the world. Now the sweat that ran down his forehead no longer came from intense rounds but from the daily work to keep the doors open and inspire young Filipinos who dreamed of a better future through sports. On that particularly hot afternoon, while organizing, equipment worn from use, a familiar pain in his shoulder reminded him of the injury that had prematurely ended his career. Manny didn't allow himself to dwell on regrets, but there was one person who frequently visited his thoughts: Carlos "Master" Velasquez, the trainer who had discovered his talent in the poor streets of General Santos and transformed him into a world champion. After a disagreement during preparation for his last professional fight, Manny and Carlos went their separate ways, a wound that even time couldn't completely heal. 20 years had passed without them exchanging a single word, each carrying their part of the guilt and pride that kept them apart, despite shared memories of glory and overcoming adversity. Manny's small gym, with its patched punching bags and improvised ring, attracted young people without resources but full of dreams. Among them was Miguel, a 17-year-old boy whose natural talent reminded Manny of himself in his youth. The veteran saw in the teenager not only speed and strength, but the same hungry determination that had lifted him out of poverty decades ago. After observing Miguel in a particularly intense training session, Manny realized that the young man possessed skills that deserved more than he could offer alone. The young fighter needed someone who understood the technical fundamentals at a deeper level, someone who could refine his unique style. He needed a trainer like Carlos Velasquez had been for him. The idea of seeking out his former mentor crossed Manny's mind like a precise jab, leaving him momentarily defenseless against the emotions that assailed him. Rumors indicated that Carlos still lived in the city, having stepped away from professional boxing to work with vulnerable children in a social project in the poorest part of Manila. As he walked home that night, the city lights reflecting in puddles left by a passing rain, Manny made a decision that would change the course of the coming months. For Miguel, for all the young people who placed their hopes in his hands, and perhaps for himself, he would find Carlos and try to rebuild the bridge they had destroyed 2 decades ago. The community center where Carlos developed his social work was located in a neighborhood forgotten by the authorities, where children ran barefoot between deteriorated buildings. Manny remained across the street for almost an hour, observing the movement at the entrance of the simple building, gathering courage to cross the physical distance that seemed so small compared to the emotional abyss between him and his former master. When he finally entered the improvised hall, the smell of sweat and the rhythmic sound of gloves hitting punching bags instantly transported him to the past. In the center of the space, a gray-haired man with an erect posture was correcting the position of a girl of approximately 12 years. Even from behind, Manny immediately recognized Carlos Velasquez, the man who had shaped his destiny with firm hands and precise words. The moment their eyes met froze time around them. Carlos seemed to age 10 years and rejuvenate 20 in the same instant, his face marked by life expressing a complex mixture of surprise, recognition, and an emotion that neither man would be able to adequately name. The children and teenagers present in the hall continued their exercises, oblivious to the silent history unfolding between the 2 boxing veterans. Without needing words, Carlos led Manny to a small room at the back of the center, a simple space decorated with yellowed newspaper clippings and old photographs. Among them, in a prominent position, was an image of the 2 together after Manny's first world championship, their younger faces radiating the pure happiness that only great shared victories can provide. The reunion in the small office was like reopening a time capsule. The first hours were filled with careful updates about their lives, each measuring their words, testing the ground like two experienced boxers in the first round of an important fight. Carlos had lost his wife to cancer 5 years earlier and dedicated his days to teaching boxing and values to at-risk children, while his own son had pursued a career as a doctor in another country. When Manny finally mentioned Miguel and his extraordinary potential, a familiar gleam lit up Carlos's tired eyes. The possibility of working again with a promising talent, especially under the recommendation of his most brilliant pupil, awakened in the old trainer an energy that seemed to have been dormant for a long time. The sun had already set when they agreed that Carlos would visit Manny's gym the next morning to observe the young fighter. The walk home that night had a different flavor for Manny. The stars seemed brighter over Manila, and the invisible weight he had carried on his shoulders for 2 decades had become a little lighter. He still didn't know if it would be possible to completely rebuild the friendship they had lost, but the first step had been taken, and that was more than he had achieved in 20 years of silence. The next day, Carlos's presence at the gym caused a stir among the young fighters, who had grown up hearing stories about the legendary partnership between Manny Santos and his mentor. Miguel, in particular, seemed nervous and determined at the same time, as if instinctively understanding the importance of the moment. When he began to move in the ring, under the watchful eye of the 2 veterans, each punch and each dodge told a story of potential not yet realized. The following weeks brought a new routine to the small gym. Carlos began to appear every morning, initially just to work with Miguel, but gradually extending his guidance to other promising young people. His disciplined methodology complemented Manny's more intuitive style, creating a learning environment that attracted more and more aspiring fighters and even the attention of some local sports journalists. During training, the 2 masters rarely talked about the past, focusing on the technical development of the young people and on preparing Miguel for his first amateur tournament. However, in moments of pause, sitting side by side watching the students practice, small confessions began to emerge, fragments of long-held truths that together formed a mosaic of unspoken regret and forgiveness. It was during one of these moments that Carlos finally addressed the night of the disagreement, when he had accused Manny of neglecting his health by insisting on fighting even with a serious shoulder injury. The old trainer admitted that his fear of losing his most talented fighter to a permanent injury had manifested as anger, while Manny acknowledged that his youthful pride had prevented him from listening to the advice of someone who only wanted what was best for him. True reconciliation didn't come in a single dramatic moment, but was built day by day, in small gestures and sincere words. The gym students began to notice the change in dynamics between the 2 veterans, the way they completed each other's sentences, and how their teaching styles merged into a unique methodology that incorporated the best of both. The regional tournament, that would mark Miguel's official debut, was approaching when a sports documentary producer visited the gym. Intrigued by the story of the reunion between the legendary champion and his mentor after 2 decades apart, the young filmmaker proposed recording not only Miguel's preparation for the competition, but also the reconciliation journey of the 2 veterans who were now joining forces again. Initially reluctant to expose their personal lives, Manny and Carlos ended up agreeing to the project upon realizing that their story could inspire others to overcome resentments and value the relationships that truly matter. The filming became part of the gym's routine, with individual interviews where both revisited painful memories and moments of shared glory. During one of these sessions, Carlos revealed something that Manny had never known. In the weeks after their separation, the trainer had tried to make contact several times, even attending his pupil's last professional fight disguised among the crowd. Pride and the pain of perceived rejection prevented him from approaching that day, a decision he would regret for the next 20 years. This revelation deeply affected Manny, making him understand that the lost time had been the result not of an irreparable rupture, but of a series of misunderstandings fueled by both men's pride. That night, alone in his modest apartment, the former champion cried for the first time in years, not from sadness but from the relief of finally understanding that not all of life's defeats are definitive. The day of the tournament arrived, with an electric energy in the air. Miguel, trained by the unique combination of Manny and Carlos's knowledge, had transformed into a more complete fighter, incorporating the explosive speed that had made his mentor famous with the refined technique that only decades of experience could teach. The stands of the small gymnasium were packed, with many spectators attracted not only by the promise of a new talent, but also by the presence of the two legendary names in Filipino boxing. The film crew captured every moment, from the preparation in the locker rooms to the final instructions, before Miguel climbed into the ring for his first fight. In the opposite corners, other trainers watched with curiosity, and perhaps a little apprehension, the unlikely duo that now commanded the young debutante's corner. Some veterans of the local boxing circuit approached to greet the former idols, many expressing surprise and joy at seeing them working together again. Miguel won his first fight with surprising ease, demonstrating unusual technical maturity for someone so young. Between the rounds of the second, more disputed fight, the camera captured a moment that would later go viral. Carlos adjusting Miguel's protection while Manny leaned in to give instructions, their faces close, united by the same objective. 2 generations of boxing knowledge converging to guide a third. As Miguel advanced in the tournament, facing increasingly experienced opponents, the story of his mentor's reunion began to circulate among those present. Sports journalists covering the event approached for interviews, and social media began to echo the images captured by the documentary team, especially a particularly touching photograph of the two veterans embracing after Miguel's qualification for the tournament final. The grand final of the regional tournament transcended the significance of a simple amateur competition. The gymnasium was completely packed, with people standing in the corridors and even watching through the windows. Miguel's opponent in the final was an older and more experienced fighter, the specialist's favorite, and sponsored by a traditional academy in the capital. In the moments before the fight, cameras from national broadcasters joined the documentary team, attracted by the story that was already beginning to spread beyond boxing circles. When the gong sounded, Miguel faced the most difficult rounds of his young career. After being dominated at the beginning, the young man managed to apply the strategies taught by his mentors, adapting to difficulties and finding gaps in the opponent's defense. The crowd vibrated with each successful combination, but for Manny and Carlos, side by side in the corner, time seemed to fold back on itself as if they were reliving their own battles through the young pupil. The unanimous decision victory came after 5 intense rounds, with Miguel demonstrating not only talent, but also the heart of a true champion. At the moment the result was announced, the cameras captured the image that would go viral globally in the following hours. Manny and Carlos together raising the arms of the young winner, 3 generations of fighters united by the sport that had shaped their lives in such profound ways. In the weeks that followed, the documentary about the reunion was completed and released on a streaming platform, reaching millions of views in just a few days. Invitations for interviews and appearances on sports programs began to arrive, as well as proposals for the duo to expand their work to a larger academy. However, for Manny and Carlos, the real triumph wasn't in the renewed fame or professional opportunities, but in the rediscovery of a friendship they had considered lost and in the chance to pass on their knowledge to a new generation, proving that some partnerships are too strong to be broken by time or pride. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to our channel.